Hi everyone, Andrew here. This week I want to talk a little bit about digital literacies. Now in the online content, we've written a bit about some of the different things that go into thinking about digital literacy. We know that this has a lot of similarities with what we usually think of as literacy, that is, the ability to read and write, but there are some important differences when we think about literacy in the electronic context. And I just want to go over a few of those today. Now, this concept of digital literacy is something that's quite popular right now. A lot of different organizations and political figures want to promote the idea that they really care about digital literacy, that this is something that matters a lot to their organization and to the kinds of education that they're promoting. So for example, we have this statement from Navdeep Bains from 2018, the Canadian Minister of Innovation, Science and Economic Development, where they suggest that it's really important for Canadians to have the tools to access the information and opportunities that are online. We also have this statement from the US Agency for International Development, where they talk about the necessity of promoting digital literacy skills in being able to create, communicate, and evaluate information online in a way that promotes benefits in economic and social life. We also have this statement from the UK Secretary of State for the Home Department, who suggests that there's an important safety function to improving one's digital literacy. You actually protect yourself by becoming more digitally literate. So all over the place, we see people promoting this idea that this is something we want to nurture within students, but it all begs the question, what exactly are we talking about? Are all of these figures meaning the same thing? What's the best way to conceptualize what digital literacy means? What does it actually encompass? Now, by the end of this class, this is one of the questions that we're going to answer. By the end of this presentation, you should feel confident in being able to define digital literacy. And the main source that I'm going to be drawing upon is the work of the researcher Doug Belshaw, who currently works for Mozilla and whose PhD dissertation is focused on this concept of digital literacies. You should also, by the end of this presentation, be able to explain practical applications for digital literacy. Doug Belshaw has an 8-piece taxonomy. There's 8 different things that he believes digital literacy encompasses, and for each one of these, I'm going to give you a real-world application and an example of what it means. Lastly, I'm going to talk to you a bit about methods for increasing digital literacy. So you should feel confident not just in understanding what it is and where it can be applied, but in how to develop it in yourself. So Doug Belshaw's model suggests that there are 8 different elements that make up digital literacy. And in fact, he prefers using the term digital literacies rather than refer to it with a singular word. He suggests that these 8 parts involve a cultural element, a cognitive element, a constructive element, a communicative element, a confident element, a creative element, a critical element, and a civic element. That all of these different elements combined go into what we call digital literacies. So I'm going to talk about each one of these different aspects in detail. First, I'm going to speak a bit about the cultural element of digital literacy. This is defined in Belshaw's terms as an understanding of the different ways that one behaves and interprets information in different online contexts. The way that you act, for example, in an online competitive game, something like League of Legends, is very different from how you would behave and conduct yourself in a professional communication on the application Slack, or something like Microsoft Teams, or through your work email, right? Part of being digitally literate means recognizing that one size does not fit all. What counts as appropriate in one online context is completely inappropriate in another online context. This seems like an obvious thing, but in fact it's something that you need to learn. You need to understand the conventions and norms of these different online cultural environments. The best way to do this is to immerse yourself in a variety of online contexts, to expose yourselves to different ways of behaving and thinking and communicating with others, broaden your horizons. The second element of digital literacy is the cognitive element. This is defined as the ability to expand one's mind and effectively use cognitive tools to process information in an electronic environment. So this is in general having the skill set to be able to use a lot of things, the ability to understand what's taking place when you use different digital tools and technologies. An example of where you can apply this element of digital literacy is when you start to recognize web pages not as these literal static combinations of text and images, but instead as fundamentally being strings of code which you can manipulate and change in different ways. As soon as you start to look at web pages in this way, a lot of different things open up to you. The best way to develop yourself in this is to expose yourself to different ways of conceptualizing and navigating online environments and materials. So take courses on Coursera or LinkedIn Learning, go to forums like Stack Overflow or various subreddits. Try to put yourself in the shoes of people who interact with online contexts in very different ways than you might be used to. If you do this, your cognitive tool set will start to expand and you'll be able to use and interact with the online context in a very different and productive way. The next element of digital literacy is constructive. This is defined as the ability to use digital tools in order to create something new or to transform something that already exists. In effect, this is having the knowledge to actually be able to use and do the things that you want to do online. An example of this would be to have the ability to use Adobe Photoshop in order to combine different images and texts or maybe even GIFs or videos and to create a new meme. Instead of just recirculating things that other people have already put out there, making something of your own, sharing it with others. The best way to improve in this element of digital literacy is just to experiment. Try things out. Throw yourself in there. Right? What's the worst that can happen? The next element of digital literacy is the communicative element. This is defined as an understanding of the way that communications media work and the way in which one communicates with others in a networked environment. This is the best example of this is recognizing that it's better to send out a short, pithy, and perhaps humorous or interesting tweet than to send out a 50-page essay online if you care about circulating your ideas. Very few people are going to read that 50-page paper. In fact, think about how it is when you go to a website and there are no images, it's just big blocks of texts. How likely are you to pay really close attention to every aspect of that text? Not super likely. Think about the way that the biggest companies in the world structure their websites. They're filled with images and interactions. These are things that engage the audience and that are much more effective at communicating with them than just block and block and block after text. The best way to improve in this regard is just to pay attention to the way that media gets attention online and to think about what's actually grabbing your attention. Right? When you're going to a web page, what gets you interested? What makes you stop what you're doing and pay attention to some sort of message or video or something else that people are circulating? Pay attention to those moments where your attention is captured and think about what's going on. Once you've recognized that, then think about what you can apply to your own practice. The next element of digital literacy is known as the confident element. This isn't just confidence in the usual way of thinking about it, as in a kind of positive emotional state, a sense of your own excellence and competence. Rather, within the context of digital literacy, this is a mindset in which you recognize that the electronic tools that you're using actually allow for unique forms of experimentation, iteration, and trial and error. Think about this. The difference between typing something up on a word processor versus typing something up on a typewriter. If you make a mistake on a typewriter, it's a real pain to correct what you've done. Right? You've stamped ink onto the paper. Correcting it is not simple. Whereas if you make a mistake on a word processor, you can just Control Z, undo. Right? It's very easy to correct mistakes when you're using these tools. When you get into the mindset of recognizing that it's okay to test something out and see if it works, you'll be able to accomplish a lot more. So an example of this would be making a video and feeling comfortable about mistakes in one's presentation, since errors can always be corrected in editing. For example, when I'm making this video, at one point in the middle, actually, my daughter came inside and just started sitting on my lap and talking. I wasn't too worried about it. It interrupted my flow a little bit, but it's not a big deal because I was able to correct it in editing. So none of you had to see it. The best way to improve in this regard is, to quote Ms. Frizzle from the Magic School Bus, to take chances, make mistakes, and get messy. It's okay when you're learning how to use a new piece of software or to create a new kind of media to try something that doesn't work. That's actually often the best way to figure out what does work. Whenever I start to learn a new program, I don't generally look through the documentation in great detail at the beginning. I just start going, and I see what works and I see what doesn't. Later on, I'll check in the documentation often, and if there's some particular thing that I'm trying to do, I'll look up some sort of instructional video on it. But I find that the way that I learn best is just by experimenting, putting things out there, and I'm not worried about the mistakes that I'm going to make, because they're easy to fix. The next element of digital literacy is the creative element. And this is the ability to develop new approaches to pre-existing problems, to create new things, or to combine ideas or concepts in an original way. Creativity is really mostly about combination, putting things together in ways that other people just haven't yet. So a good example of this would be using GarageBand in order to create and record a new song and to test out using unusual sounds or production techniques. The best way to improve in this regard is to try to take advantage of the opportunities that are enabled by these technologies to do things that ordinarily would only be in the hands of professionals or elites. Right? Think how inexpensive it is now to produce your own piece of music. This is something that's available now to millions of people, whereas in the past it was just handfuls of people who actually had that potential. This is a pretty amazing thing, and it's something that we should really take advantage of if we want to really stretch our creative muscles. The next element of digital literacy is the critical element, and this is the ability to use relevant and accurate information in order to make informed decisions and to recognize the power dynamics at work in various online contexts. In a sense, this is about not taking things at face value. Right? It's about being a little bit skeptical about what's going on. A good example of this is being aware of the way in which search engines like Google manipulate search results in order to promote certain actions, ideas, and discourage others. The search results that you see on Google are not necessarily going to be the same as the search results that I see. Google has formed a profile of each of us based on what it thinks we want and what it thinks we're most likely to do or purchase. and it gives us search results that are catered to our particular desires, at least as Google thinks them. This is something that's important to be aware of. This doesn't mean that we shouldn't use these tools, but if we do use them, we should be aware of what's going on. We should be conscious consumers. The best way to improve in this regard is just to question who benefits from the internet in its current form. The World Wide Web used to be a great decentralized space in which there was no central hub where information was exchanged or purchases were made. Who benefits from the way the internet is run now? Pay attention to this. Be a conscious consumer and be a conscious user of the web and understand who is mediating the things that you see. The last element of digital literacy is the civic element. And this involves the ability to use digital tools in a way that contributes to the public good and advances the cause of civil society. A good example of this would be using social media to connect with others, develop political coalitions that can reflect upon the events of the day. The best way to improve in this regard is to practice viewing the online environment not just as a private space where it's just you and the computer, but instead as a kind of public sphere in which ideas can and should be exchanged. Right? The online environment is a place where things genuinely matter. And taking it seriously is a very important thing to do. Now, throughout the course of this course, I hope that you'll be able to develop each element of digital literacy, improving your ability to comprehend how digital technologies work and to gain that knowledge that's necessary in order for you to learn and teach yourself new things. The technologies that we're using today will not necessarily be the technologies that we use 5 years from now. Right? The rapid pace of technological change means that things are very quickly rendered obsolete. But the basic ability to interact with these tools and to learn how to learn is very unlikely to go out of date. The next thing that I hope you develop is the ability to just use these tools and put them to work in a variety of projects at the level of a practicing professional. The particular tools that you'll need to know how to use will vary depending on your industry, but this is something that you can start working on now. Think about your field. What software do people know? What software do they post in job postings as being a requirement? Start developing those skills right away, and in the future, you'll be able to refine them even further. Lastly, I hope you'll be able to develop the ability to create new things and to innovate with these tools. It might not be immediately apparent where there is room for innovation and creativity, but as you gain more knowledge and experience, you'll be able to see more of these opportunities for you to make your mark. I want to end things off with a quote from Doug Belshaw. He suggests that we should see digital literacies as plural, context-dependent, and co-created. He encourages us to feel empowered to create our own definitions and remix other people's work, instead of being unduly deferential to well-known, big-name practitioners and researchers. Ultimately, in Belshaw's view, digital literacy is about seeing the extent to which you're an agent within the online space, the extent to which you have the freedom and power to do things a little bit differently than the people before you. All right, thanks everyone for your time today. I look forward to seeing you soon.